Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And this is Lorenzo.
And welcome to Hacking Your Leadership, a Spreaker Prime podcast.
Thanks to all our Patreon members and our loyal listeners for tuning in today. Before we begin, here's a short message from a sponsor.
No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, I realized something the other day. We are pretty much exactly a year into what we know as pandemic.
Yes.
A year.
Yes, we are.
A year, man. It doesn't seem like a year. It sometimes seems like a week, and sometimes it seems like a decade. Right?
Yeah. So true.
There's a lot that has happened over the last year, obviously, to everybody. There's no person on earth who has not been touched by this in some way. And, you know, we were having a conversation the other day around what that means for people going forward, what that means for, you know, how we change the things that we need to change, how we learn to do things differently. And, you know, and we decided to do something that we don't always do because we have a lot of experience in this space, but you know, I think we wanted to dig in a little bit deeper and figure out what other people have said about this or talked about, not in the context of the pandemic, but intentionally looking to what people were talking about with regards to learning to learn new things and change management and the ways people kind of coped before the pandemic, because everything nowadays is about the pandemic. But I think some of the skills are skills that have always been there, and we're just having to kind of put new spins on them. And you know, one of the articles that we found was from Harvard Business Review by Erika Andersen, and it's about 5 years old now, and it's called Learning to Learn. And it really resonated. There are 4 different elements of learning to learn that Erika talks about, and I think it's appropriate to do kind of like a little 4-part series on this article because I think each of them is so important that I don't think we could do each of them justice by trying to fit all of them in to a single one. And you know, the 4 elements of, you know, learning to learn, according to Erika Andersen, are aspiration, self-awareness, curiosity, and vulnerability. And, you know, you can kind of like let that, you know, stir in your mind a little bit if you're listening right now. But on this episode, we want to talk about the element of learning to learn that is aspiration. And so, you know, what are your thoughts about this, Lorenzo? What do you think about aspiration when it comes to learning to learn in the context of what we're dealing with in our lives now?
Well, I think, you know, a positive energy, optimism, things like that for me, like this kind of positive feeling of wanting to achieve a goal from an aspirational standpoint, like that's super duper important right now. I can tell you that's a big difference in leadership, especially with a lot of leaders that I engage with across the board, whether it's something, you know, people that I talk to daily or mentors that I reach out to monthly or quarterly or whatever the case is. Having a positive look on what's going on here, and especially when you're in the, you know, we have the responsibility of leading people, and looking to see like what can we learn and that we can definitely get through this together, like kind of goal setting of we've never, you know, led through a pandemic in our lifetime. At least I haven't. We've never kind of come out of a pandemic to a degree. Like we're not there yet, but a lot of things are happening to what people are calling like the new normal. So like, does that either, you know, does that excite you? Do you have energy with that? Do you believe that, you know, what you've learned, what you've done, where we can go could make us stronger, can make us better, could make us closer, can build better relationships? Like those types of things for me are why aspiration is so important right now when it comes to leadership. And I think to your point, you know, for a long time, people have talked about, you know, being a leader of change, and change is the only constant. And, you know, how do you get comfortable with things as they're evolving over time as a leader? And are you open-minded? Like all these things have been true to leadership for a very long time. But I think to what you said, like the reason why this article really resonated is because that's what we're talking about is as leaders, are we learning right now? Are we open to learn? And are we thinking about how are we learning not only from what's happened to us globally with the pandemic, but how are we learning from our people in making sure that we're adjusting our leadership to meet what they need right now? And I think aspiration is a big, big, big part of that because if you see the work as negative or as anxious or as not possible, or if you don't see the work as a goal in the future of how to get better, it's going to be really difficult for you to be available to your people and to consider what they're feeling to be able to make changes to your own leadership.
Sure. I mean, just from a standpoint of just what you're projecting onto your team, if they look at you and they see that you are flustered or that you are that you're not kind of at least a positive mindset as you're going through this, that will be contagious, as will a positive mindset and, learning new things and showing that you're open-minded to these things. That will be contagious also. I look at it as kind of like the tools that we have in our tool bag. So prior to 2020, we had leadership tools in our tool bag. And even the best and most amazing leaders out there, they have tools in their tool bag. And there could be hundreds of them. And some of the things that we're dealing with can't be dealt with using the tools that we already have. They require different tools, or maybe the same tool, but like turn around, like spin it around and use it in the different hand instead of the left hand instead of the right hand. It could be little tweaks like that, but it's definitely not just doing the things that you've always done. And I think it's obvious when people try to use a tool for the wrong job. And you can think about it normally, the old adage, if every problem if you only have a tool, if you only have a hammer in your tool bag, every problem becomes a nail, is the old adage. Well, this is the same thing. If you only have a hammer because the only problems you've ever dealt with are nails, it could be natural to think, all right, how does my hammer work here? How does it work here? It's like, well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it needs other things. And that naturally leads to a feeling of anxiety of, wait a minute, I'm really good with this hammer, but I'm not so good with this thing over here. So I can either pick it up and start learning, or I can not. But the moment that's in between there, the moment of whether or not you even see that your hammer is not working or see that there's a potentially other better tool over to the side, that's where the aspiration is. Am I looking at this through the lens of, I want things to stay the same and I'm going to hang on with every fiber of my being to try to hope that I can make things exactly like they were? Or can I put everything down and just say, I need to think about this through the mindset of things are definitely different. Everybody's having to change things. Can I have at least an open and positive attitude and mindset about this in terms of how to solve these problems going forward? Because just having that mindset will help you see the right tools to do it, and not having that mindset will mean you'll probably miss the right tools and continue doing the wrong things.
Yeah, no, I love that you call out the mindset piece because kind of by definition, aspiration, a hope or ambition of achieving something. Now, an ambition of achieving something can be like, I want to get the next job. I want to get promoted. That's
Sure.
an ambition. It has nothing to do with, as a leader, like the culture that you create, how you take care of people. I hope that I make more money. Like these are all things that it doesn't define how you show up for your people. It just simply says that you have an ambition or a hope to achieve something.
It doesn't even say that you can do it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely, right? So I think it's so important to call out because I think over time, especially before 2020 and all the things, especially think about things like social injustice and diversity, inclusion, equity, a lot of things that we have talked about quite a bit over the last year here in regards to leadership. If your ambition was simply to do whatever you had to do to move up as a leader, and your company maybe gave you, the answers to that test. You need to achieve this. You need to drive this. You need to have this done for you to personally move up. And you take that ambition and you show up every day and you kind of pretend to care about your people, or you just do enough to say like, hey, this is what we got to do. You're not really fully invested in your people. You're not taking the time to get to know them. You're not building the relationships over time that really solidify trust with your team. I think 2020, and I said this before in the podcast, was probably a really tough year for you. because the expectation of leadership has shifted and changed. And so I think it's beyond just the aspiration part of this, but the mindset and the way in which you see people and culture, the way in which you see, leadership and how you show up for people is critically important as the ambition piece or the hope piece in regards to aspiration. I think companies will continue to have expectations, and they'll say, like, this is the goal and it's what we want you to achieve, and we believe that you can do it. But how you do it now is so much more important than as it ever has been before, because people are looking at leaders with a different lens. They're looking at leaders with a higher level of expectation. They are, especially as they can compare and contrast leadership throughout 2020 and kind of beyond. It's very apparent when you see leaders in that space doing the right work, and it's also very apparent when you see leaders in the space not doing that right work. And as people start to compare those two, I think it's going to cause more accountability for leadership from their people.
Right, I agree. I want to give like a little example here, because I want to make sure our listeners are on the same page here. It's going to seem obvious, but really think about this in the context of how you used to lead your people. And so I put myself in the mindset of pre-2020. I'm coming to work. I have a team of people, maybe 10 or 15 people who report up to me, and I can write down, like, I think it's important to write things down in terms of aspiration, right? So aspiration was important prior to the pandemic. So I might say that my aspiration in 2018 or 2019 was, I need to make sure that I meet one-on-one with every single one of my people on a bi-weekly basis. Once every 2 weeks, I'm going to meet with everybody. And if I have, 14 people or 15 people on my team, and, a meeting might even be 15 or 20 minutes, I should be able to get that in. I should be able to make that happen, one person a day, basically, until I get everybody in. That could be my aspiration. Now, in the context of today, if I go back and my aspiration is still the same thing, first of all, I'm going to fail, because I'm not even in the same building with my people anymore. So if I have taken what was aspiration and I made that the thing that I have to get done, that now has turned into a hindrance as opposed to a help. If I go back in time now and I say, okay, the aspiration was to meet with my people, but really, was that the aspiration, or was the aspiration to connect with my people? I defined it as meeting with them because there was no reason to define it any other way. We were able to meet with our people. We were in the same building with them. It's very easy to just kind of assume things that we can all take for granted because they are unchanging. Well, those changed. They're changed now. So don't go into it the same way and think, okay, my aspiration is to meet with my people once every 2 weeks, just like it was before, because you won't be able to get that done. The aspiration really is, how can I connect with my people in a way to make sure that they are bought into the business, make sure that they're productive, make sure that they feel held accountable, but held accountable by a person who cares about their growth and development. If that's now my aspiration, now my mind is open a little bit more to thinking, okay, what do I need to do to get there, as opposed to what roadblocks do I need to lift in order to be able to meet with my people every 2 weeks? Because that could mean, well, maybe we find a Starbucks. Maybe we find No. I'm already barking up the wrong tree here. So go back and think about what are you actually trying to do? And I think a lot of times that can really clear your mind of the things that are stopping you, that you might think are a requisite to get something done.
I love that analogy and kind of that idea of like what may have been an aspiration before, which was simply to just talk to people to make sure that they're getting the work done and the job done, was really rooted in the idea of connecting with people. Mm-hmm. It was just only done to a certain percent. Where now, like, that connection piece is almost like an expectation. Where like, or it should be an expectation from an aspirational standpoint of like, am I getting closer to my team? Am I leaving space for them to talk about how they feel, what they're doing, what they're working through, what's going on? Am I listening for potential resources that might be available to them for more organization? And my lens, your lens should be changing drastically to really make sure that people feel welcomed. They feel safe, they feel empowered, they feel heard. All these things that matter when you're really thinking about building cultures and environments of high-performing teams, big chunks of that is that people feel a space where they can be trusted, where they can be pushed a little bit, to your point, like that there's accountability from a good place, that I'm doing this because you shared with me that this is what you want a goal for, professionally or personally. It's one of the questions, I just had this conversation with somebody the other day where I said, talk to me about the work that you're doing and what you're working on, and what are your goals for this work? What do you want to achieve? What are the things that you want to sharpen from a skill set or some skill that you want to build? That sounds great. And then I said, okay, so talk to me about the next, 5 years. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Like, what are the things that you want to achieve by then? And it started off with just dialogue around the professional environment. I want to be in a kind of a role like this, or I want to be this level of responsibility. And I said, well, personally, like what do you want to see in yourself 5 years personally? And they took a second, and they took a breath, and they thought about it, and then they shared with me, and it was a very personal goal. And I was like, well, that's fantastic. Not only that, but like, let me share with you my personal story in that same kind of a space, where that was a personal goal of mine. And because of how life works, that goal was delayed for a while because of things happening. But then I eventually achieved that goal. But I remember that. Like, I remember having that same type of a personal goal. And what's great about that type of a personal goal is it kept me focused on what I was achieving. And it reminded me to make decisions in different ways to make sure that I was able to achieve that personal goal. Because why do we do all of this? We do all of this. We work really hard. We get better at what we do to provide opportunities for ourselves to go and achieve those personal goals. So I just share that because that's such an important thing right now that I believe that our workforces are getting more and more clear upon that they want. They want to know not only that you are maybe aware of my personal goals, but that you are a part of this journey in helping me achieve them.
Right. I mean, the goals of people, we've said this long before the pandemic. You can go back and listen to shows before the word COVID even existed in the minds of all of our listeners here, where we talked about the things that people want and expect out of their jobs in order to give their best to that job. And the number one thing is growth and development. They want to get better at not just the job they're doing, but more marketable in order to be able to bring those skills to another job or to get, to advance their career in some way. That is like number one. It was number one prior to 2020. It's number one today. How we get our people there, though, that has changed. But the fact that that is a prerequisite, I think honestly, it's even more important to people now, because in a remote work environment for a lot of people, it's opening other people's minds, it's making your employees more aspirational as to what is possible to them from a work-life balance standpoint and a happiness standpoint. And their non-negotiables are becoming more non-negotiable when it comes to what they will give to a job in order to be able to, give their best to that job, what they're requiring out of you. Here's my weekly parenting reference here. I was putting my kids to bed a few weeks ago, and we have a dog that loves to jump up on the kid's bed during bedtime. And my son had a rough day with the dog. Like, there was a couple of times where the dog was getting just a little too rough. He's a puppy. He's a small puppy, and he was having kind of a rough day. And so their relationship for that day was kind of like strained. And the puppy jumped up on the bed and laid down. And we told my son it was time to climb under the covers. And he said, I can't climb under the covers. The dog's in the way. And it wasn't in the way. The dog was not in the way. It was kind of right in the middle of the bed. And I said, he's not in the way. Just climb into the bed like you normally would, and he will move if he needs to move. And he did this kind of like wincing, like, like kind of this intentional movement. And the way he climbed into the bed was right on top of where the dog was instead of over to the side. So he could say, look, there's no room, And I got mad at him. And we had to talk about this. Like, I said, all right, we're done here. Like, and I had to talk with him, and it had nothing to do with the act of what he was doing. It's the mindset he brought to it was not, there's a problem here, potentially. I need to figure out what the solution is, which is me just climbing under the covers. How do I do that in a way that gets that done while maintaining a positive attitude, knowing there could be something that stops me from doing it exactly the way I've always done it? And instead, he did it in a way that made my wife and I believe that he was put out by it. That, it was like, he martyred himself a little bit in order to get under the covers. And it's a really simple analogy, but this is what I'm talking about. Do you have the mindset that says there are roadblocks in the way here, ones we've not seen before, ones that might come up here. When they happen, do you knee-jerk respond with, how is this going to trip me up? Or do you knee-jerk respond with, ooh, here's a challenge. That's not going to detract me from what I know needs to get done. So how do I maneuver? How do I bob and weave and make sure I still get where I'm going so I can look at that roadblock, the next day and say, you had nothing on me because I'm still on the path. That's what aspiration is required to accomplish. If you don't have aspiration of whatever that goal is, you won't be able to look at those roadblocks in that way. You'll look at them negatively.
Yep, I completely agree. And with that, I want to shout out Betsy, one of our new Patreons, and thank so many of our Patreons for posting pictures of their Hacking Your Leadership mugs that they've received. I'm a little bit jealous because I don't actually have one yet, but we really, really appreciate that. And so now it's time for our 1 minute hack. But first, a word from a sponsor.
The 1 minute hack.
All right, for this episode's 1 minute hack, here's what I want you to do. Get out your pen and paper, and I want you to think back over the last 30 or 60 days. You can go back 60 if you need to, but if you're really thinking about this, you should be able to do it in 30. Think about all the times and write them down where something got in the way of you getting done what you had to get done. And we're not talking big things here. It can be little things too. Write all those episodes down, and then I want you to think, what was your initial reaction to seeing or feeling or hearing that roadblock? Was it, how is this going to stop me from getting my job done or what I need to get done? Or is it, this is good, I'm okay with this, here's how I will still get this thing done and how this is not going to stop me? Think about what your mindset was for each of those. And if you can say that it was on the positive side, put a little checkbox next to each one. The ones that you can't say that for, the ones that you thought about, how is this going to trip me up? How is this stressing me out? Don't put a check mark next to that. If you have check marks next to the majority of those things, you are already doing this. This is awesome. Kudos to you. If you don't have check marks next to all of these things, then this is something you really need to work on, because I promise you it's showing to your people. The reactions that you have, whether they are, when they are negative, your people see those things, they feel them from you, and it will cause them to take the exact same mindset when it comes to the problems you throw at them, which you are obviously doing every single day. So get better at doing this on a positive mindset standpoint, and you'll be surprised how quickly those problems turn into not problems.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack. And also give yourself a little bit of grace, because I'll be fully transparent. There's a lot of times when I see or hear something and my first reaction is like, oh, this sucks and this is stupid. But I very quickly move into, okay, what am I going to do to make this a thing that we can work on or get through or work around? So yeah, it's okay to have an initial visceral reaction to something, but you don't want to live in that space for very long, and you definitely don't want to live in that space around your people, or kind of that be the first time that you're engaging with whatever that thing is. Take a second, count to 10, take some deep breaths, and then think about, well, if this is something that I'm going to have to work through, or it's going to delay me in what I'm trying to achieve, what can I do to work with this or work around this, or what can I do to solve this with my people, so that to your point, Chris, that when I'm addressing them and the thing, it's coming from a space of how do we work together to solve this and work around this, versus, oh my gosh, can you believe how bad this is? What the heck are we going to do? The world's on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of the old, so what is it called? The Serenity Prayer that the Alcoholics Anonymous use. Grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's what this is. How do you get to a place where you know the difference between the problems you cannot change, you just have to accept and be able to move through, or the things that you can change? Knowing the difference between those two is what you need in order to be able to move forward.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.